Now, I will try to get into my formal presentation with the time that I have left. I must tell you honestly, I have about 5 hours of material, and I got about an hour left. But where to begin? As I told you, I was a professional soldier. I spent most of my life in the military. And to be candid with you, and there's another old friend of mine out here somewhere in the dark who is also a retired command sergeant major. The two of us, both of us, and many of us have been places we should not have been, and we've done things we should not have done in the service of our country. But that's history. In 1963, the curious skeptic was assigned to the Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers in Europe, which you saw the seal up here. And I learned something then that literally has turned my life around. I throw the picture of me up there if you will. I don't think they'll believe it, but do you ever believe I was that young? When I was assigned to Shape Headquarters in 1963, I was fortunate enough and honored enough to work for an absolutely beautiful man, a commanding general who we knew of as SACEUR, the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. General Lyman Lemnitzer, and he's one of the dearest people I've ever known. I served with him and for him for 5 years. And that experience, working for him and being exposed to the material that I was exposed to, has literally changed my life. And I have said to you again, subject is so important that we all have got to come to terms with it and address it. Now, what do we got next up there? Show me the next picture. Oh, this is a picture of Cecilia and I at SHAPE 2 years ago. I went back to reminisce and try to meet some old cronies. Now, SHAPE is now located in Belgium. What is it? Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers, Europe. We were there 2 years ago. In 1967, General Charles de Gaulle withdrew from the military alliance. He stayed a member of NATO, but he pulled out of the SHAPE military alliance, I think more than anything else out of sheer embarrassment. Because an enormous French spy ring had been going on in Paris for a number of years. And when these unusual, strange, unknown objects were appearing over Central Europe, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers Europe, General Lemnitzer and his deputy, Air Marshal Sir Thomas Pike, asked London and Paris repeatedly for information on the subject. I think you got a slide in there somewhere about the map. Put the slide up, if you will, please. The map of Central Europe, 1961. Next one. Yeah, here we go. A little history here. In the late 50s and early 60s, strange, unusual objects, very large, very fast, flying very high, flying very obviously under intelligent control, were flying all over the place, all over Central Europe. They would generally come out of the eastern area from Soviet Union over the Warsaw Pact area. Here's Poland here, Czechoslovakia here. This is an old map. It still shows a divided Germany. These objects would come in formation, echelon, V, whatever. They would fly over Europe at a high altitude, at a high rate of speed, and very obviously under intelligent control. They would fly over the NATO forces. They would fly over France, Germany, generally over the southern coast of England, and invariably they would turn north over the Channel and disappear off of NATO radar over the North Sea. Now, for a while, the Soviets thought those objects belonged to us. And for a time, we honestly believed they might have been Soviet. But they were very apparently under intelligent control, and they were very obviously extremely advanced in their technology. In the 50s and 60s, they were doing things that our guys couldn't even begin to do. They made fools out of us. They humbled many of our fighter pilots. They made fools out of our radar people. They played games with us. But what was happening is that during the Cold War years, those serious, really dangerous years, where we and the Soviets and the Warsaw Pact had our fingers on the triggers, our thumbs poised above the red buttons, and nuclear war was just a second away. This was really a fly in the ointment, to put it nicely. These guys would come in and fly over Europe and disappear, and no one knew what the hell they were. General Lemnitzer and Air Marshal Pike had tried repeatedly to get information from London and Paris on these objects. What are they? What do you know about them? Share with us. London and Paris would provide nothing to shape, because everything that went to Paris went directly to Moscow. And then sometimes it got to the KGB before it got to us there in Paris. Now this spy ring, if you're interested in doing a little historical research, is written up completely in a beautiful book by Leon Uris, written some years ago, called Topaz. Topaz was made into a very good movie, and it's all true. It's well done. That spy ring that existed then is what caused London and Paris to keep from giving us information. When it was over, there were a bunch of French ministers who took some nosedives out of high buildings. We found colonels and generals and a couple of minor admirals dead in the woods around the outskirts of Paris. I'm convinced that that incident, more than anything else, is what got General de Gaulle to withdraw from the NATO alliance, from the military side of it, and forced SHAPE to move in 1967 up to its new location in Brussels, or outside of Brussels. But anyhow, that's a little piece of history I'm throwing out there. An event occurred in February of 1961, where about 50 of these objects appeared flying at a high speed over Europe at a high altitude in formation that damn near triggered the shooting. Air Marshal Pike, the staff, General Lemnitzer, all of them said, this has got to stop. We can't have this going on anymore. So they established an in-house study. They got the Secretary General of NATO at that time to allow the funding, the expenditures. And they launched a 3-year study in 1961, and they called it an assessment. And it had a subtitle of an evaluation of a possible military threat to Allied forces in Europe. I see the next slide. Next slide, please. This is a facsimile, believe me, it's not real. I tried as best I could to make it look like what it looked like, but don't think for a moment that this is under my bed and it's the real thing. For any of you guys out there who might be interested in that. But it was titled an assessment. It was given a cosmic top secret, and this is the most accurate way I can portray this thing because it was just exactly like that. I damn near memorized it. The study itself was roughly 1.5 inches thick, 384 pages. It was supported by a bunch of annexes and appendices, 10 in all, that really were the meat of this subject, really had the impact and the power of this thing. And when I got a chance to see this thing, when it was published in 1964, and I want you to understand it was published in limited copies, they only made 15. They gave it the highest classification they had at NATO at that time, and they still have. Cosmic is the one they had then and the one they have now. It's well above top secret. It's the most sensitive document in their files. They published it in '64 in 15 copies. Copy 1 went to the Secretary General of NATO. Copy 2 went to General Lemnitzer. It was kept in his personal safe in his vault. Copy 3 was sent to a place we called SHOC, the Supreme Headquarters Operations Center. And I used to work in there on 8, 10, 12-hour shifts from time to time. And if any of you guys in the military have ever served, like, you know what I'm talking about. About 2 and 3 in the morning, you get to a point where the coffee's so damn black you can't drink it. You've read all of the newspapers for the last 2 weeks. You're bored to death around 3 in the morning. And I was a master sergeant at the time, and I did indeed have a cosmic top secret clearance, and I had access to just about everything they had there. One morning when I was bored, an Air Force controller, a full colonel, pulled that thing out of the file. He said, "This will wake you up. Read this." Colonel, wherever the hell you are, That changed my life. I've never been the same. And I think when I share some of the things with you that I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. After a 3-year extensive study, the SHAPE Military Command, the NATO command, reached a number of conclusions. Does this thing work? How does this little light up here work? Not plugged in? Well, I think I can get enough from the light that's here. That's okay, honey. Thank you. The conclusions were rather mind-boggling, to say the least. Thank you. That's good. I got enough here. I will only give you a few basics, which I think will be more than sufficient. After the 3-year study, the SHAPE Military NATO Assessment concluded that apparently the planet Earth and the entire human race is and has been the subject of an extensive, intensive, and massive survey and examination of some kind by several, remember that, several extraterrestrial civilizations. This survey apparently has been extremely thorough and detailed. These civilizations have demonstrated not only high intelligence, but an extremely advanced technology that may possibly be hundreds, if not thousands of years beyond ours. Thank you. Evidence collected and studied by this report indicates that apparently there is some kind of process or plan unfolding, that they, whoever they are, have continually demonstrated the development of some kind of undergoing program. They could see it developing. In the 3 years, they could see it leading to something. They didn't know what it was. They still don't, I tell you. Evidence in this report leads to the conclusion that this survey or program has been going on for a very long time, possibly several thousands of years. Military intelligence analysis have concluded that there did not appear to be a major military threat involved. The conclusions seem to indicate that if they were either malevolent or hostile, that there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that we could do at that time. And I must reiterate that if some of these advanced technologies are malevolent or hostile, there's damn little we can do at this time. NATO and SHAPE policy dictates that an ongoing study continue by the various military committees, and that as many resources as possible by the major powers be committed to this matter. This entire subject is considered to be of the highest importance and extremely sensitive. This committee recommends that this level of classification be placed upon this matter, and if approved by General Lemnitz or by SECURE, to be above cosmic top secret. And I must tell you, after all these years, it's still in the file, it's still classified, and it is still considered probably to be the most sensitive document in NATO's possession. Now, I have got to tell you also that what NATO and SHAPE learned in 1964 was known by your government and your Air Force as early as 1949. They knew that to be a fact in the late 40s. And that's a whole story in itself, and I won't even get into that because it would keep us up here for hours. But that experience, that exposure, for me, was the beginning of a 30-year synthesis. You might call it an odyssey. You could call it a travail. You could call it any number of things. But as I said, my life changed. I was not very bright. I was not a scholar. I'd gone to college. I'd majored in ancient history and psychology, and I'd taken some courses and had a few credits. I didn't have a degree. Still don't. I have no letters behind my name. I'm simply somebody who's seen something and paid attention, and I can't walk away from it. And I'm sharing with you what I have read, what I have seen, what I know firsthand, and some of the things I have concluded after 30 years of research. We are indeed facing an event that is so important that we in this country and on this planet is facing a crisis of an incredible magnitude. Our government is facing a crisis. The crisis basically is brought about by the big lie. The idea, as Lincoln used to say, you can lie to all of the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time. But you cannot lie to all of the people all of the time, and they've tried that, and it's falling apart around their ears, simply because of people like you who are making a difference. And we're facing a crisis in our government. They're scared to death about this issue. They don't know how to share it with you. They don't know how to tell you the truth on this matter. And how do they admit to you that they've been lying through their teeth to you guys for 50 years? Well, their excuse is, well, it's so important. It's so sensitive. My God, do you see, man, what this is all about? They can't handle it out there. They're not mature enough. They're not stable enough. We just can't go out and tell them about this because they couldn't deal with it. Ladies, excuse me, that's pure bullshit. You can deal with it, and you're way ahead of your government. You know things that... Forgive me. There are a couple of quotes I need to throw in at this time that I think are very important. There's a line from the first act of Hamlet, which I think many of you are familiar with, where the young prince says to his good friend, he says, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." Remember that. There's another quote by a British scientist a number of years ago by the name of Haldane, who I believe was an astronomer, who said that the universe is not only stranger than you know, it is stranger than you can know. And I want you to remember that, because I'm going to be sharing some of the things here that I think are going to impact on those statements. It became very apparent to me very early, and as I said, the shape study for me was just the beginning. It shook me up, turned me every way but loose, turned my whole world upside down, affected my philosophy, my religious views, changed my personality, literally. But it became very apparent to me early on that there was no single discipline that I could find that would direct me toward what I considered to be sensible answers. I looked through the sciences, I looked through history, I looked here, I looked there, and it became apparent very early on that the only way to get a handle on this thing was to diversify. And what I have done over the last 30 years, I have created what I call a synthesis. It became very apparent to me very, very early on. I had to look at the history of this thing. And believe me, it goes back hundreds of thousands of years. I had to study philosophy. I had to study literature, mythology, anthropology, geology, theology, a few of the hard sciences, and I even had to get into art and music before I was able to begin to really get a handle on what I believe to be happening here. And boy, did that change my life. When I first began studying this subject and this phenomenon, I was interested in finding out, who are these guys? Who are they? Where are they from? Why are they here? And that was of interest. And I collected evidence, I collected photographs, I collected testimony, I interviewed people, I went out on landing sites, I stuck my nose in classified files. It's a wonder I'm not in jail. I've been an avid, well, I guess that's a good enough word, almost obsessed to get a handle on this, to get a feel for it, to find out what's going on. And only by putting all of these various disciplines together did I begin to get some kind of an idea of what was happening. And I forgot. I got to a point where it didn't matter anymore who they are, where they're from, and why they're here. It began to dawn on me that we're dealing with a much much larger picture here. But before I get into that, let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, this is what the annex looked like. This is what the objects looked like flying over Europe. It's an actual photograph. Go to the next one, please. This is an actual photo taken over a small town in Germany along the Rhine River. When the photographer took the shot, he said that none of this down here was apparent to his eye. This is the object, this is the disc, there's the dome on top. None of this could be seen by his eye. We've considered it to be some form of the manifestation of the energy system, the propulsion system, a corona of some kind, but it was not apparent to his eye. Next slide. Ah, yes. You might leave that up for a while. I love these pictures. As I said to you, we've gotten to a point, I had gotten to a point, that who they are and where they're from and why they're here wasn't that important. It became apparent to me very early on that this was not a matter of hardware. This was not a matter of extraterrestrial visitation. That this subject was so vast in its implications to the human race that it affects the lives of every living person on this planet. Now, before I get into some of these conclusions here, I want to explain two things to you. When I left the military in 1976, we knew of 4 extraterrestrial civilizations that were interacting with us. We had evidence that there were 4. One of the things that worried the generals and the admirals and the politicians the most in those years was that one of those groups, one of those 4, looked exactly like we do. And if you don't think that bothered the paranoid minds of the generals and the admirals, we guys in the military were trained to be paranoid. It was the name of the game. It was part of what we do. The idea that there could be some extraterrestrial advanced civilization here where they could sit next to you in a restaurant, sit beside you in an airplane, or right beside you in this hall, and ladies and gentlemen, you'd never know. You would literally never know. And that really drove the guys in the Pentagon and in SHAPE headquarters up the wall. I had lunch one day in the NAFI cafeteria at SHAPE at Rocancourt. And I have to tell you, the French drink a lot of wine, in case you didn't know that. I mean, they drink it for breakfast, they drink it at lunch, they drink it at dinner. Well, we were sitting there one day and a bunch of us were having lunch. And you could buy a carafe of wine right there at the cafeteria and sit down and have your lunch. My God, after a while my liver was beginning to suffer from that. But one colonel said, "Do you realize that they could be walking up and down the corridors of SHAPE?" Yeah. Another guy said, "My God, do you know that they could be up walking down the corridors of the Pentagon?" And then a lieutenant colonel, who I think had too much wine, says, "Do you realize that they could even be in the White House?" And there was a lot of forced laughter over that comment because many of us, I'm sure, and some of you included, have often wondered about some of the guys we get into the White House. But that was a comment that was well made and valid. Now, besides the 4 different groups, we had also learned as late as 1976, well, actually as early as 1964. And our own people here in this country had learned this, as I told you, in 1949. We were simply not dealing with interplanetary visitation. That's true, we were. We were not simply dealing with interstellar visitation, and we were simply not dealing with intergalactic visitation. We learned that we were dealing with all of the above. Interplanetary, interstellar, and intergalactic, and would you believe that some of those advanced cultures, some of those advanced technologies apparently have the ability to manipulate time and matter? We learned that some of the manifestations that have been involved with us from the beginning of our history are multidimensional in their origin. Now, if you think that doesn't turn Newtonian Einstein science upside down, now if you think that doesn't turn theology upside down, And that, to me, is probably the single most important issue as to why the cover has been clamped down on this thing and kept clamped down for so damn long. Because when the truth of this matter begins to come out, it's going to shake up our world to a point that we will never, ever be the same. Now, I'm going to share a personal view with you. I've been around the block a few times, as we used to say in the Midwest. I've learned a few things. I've seen a few things. If I'm faced with the reality of this phenomenon, and I know that it's going to have an impact on world economy that's going to be shattering, it's going to have an impact upon world sociological structure, a terrible impact on the world's psychological structure. It's going to have a devastating effect upon the world's religions. And most of the modern governments on this planet, and most of the major religions on this planet, and I have to tell you, this is my view, I see the whole thing crumbling and falling apart in a very few years. And at the risk of being misunderstood, I want you to know that I think the time has come. We've got to tear it down to build something better, for God's sake, because we can't go on. The people in this country and the people on this planet have at the most 25 years left. And we're going to have to spend those years wisely. And we're going to have to come to terms with some realities that we've never even dreamed of before. And it's going to shake us up so completely that they talk about a paradigm shift. That's a mild term. We're going to see literally the old world we have known for several thousands of years literally fall apart. It's going to come to an end. And that, in some respects, I think must happen. As I said, you've got to tear some down at the old houses. Look upon it as kind of urban renewal. You've got to tear down the old houses before you can build something better. Well, the old houses are going to collapse around us. And let me tell you what some of the things that are going to happen to cause those houses, our belief systems, our religious views, our historical ideas of who we are, going to make them fall apart completely. Could you focus that a little bit better there? This is a picture that I love. I have several of these in my show. I like to show them because they're a glimpse out into our neighborhood, into our larger family of life. I find them beautiful. I meditate and reflect upon pictures like this. I took several courses in astronomy over the years, and I like looking out there. Can I have the next slide, please? To me, that's beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our home out there. Next slide, please. Look at that. Now, can you possibly sit there and believe what some of our scientists tell us? That we are the only life form here in this universe. Now, some of you out there probably are as old as I am, who may remember when the great 200-inch lens was established and installed in Mount Palomar a number of years ago. A lot of the young people wouldn't know that at all. But I remember back in those days, astronomers used to study photographs very similar to this, and they would look out and they say, well, now these are gaseous nebulae, and these are stars, and these are stellar. Do you realize when they put the big 200-inch lens on Mount Palomar a bunch of years ago, and they looked out through that for the first time, it dawned on them that a lot of these were not stars. A lot of those were galaxies. Next slide, please. That's a galaxy. Now that's the great galaxy in Andromeda. It's in the catalogs listed as M31. The reason I like to show this, and this is an actual photograph, the reason I like to show that is that that shape of that galaxy is very much like the one we live in. And if we were out there somewhere, I mean way the hell out there, and looking back at our own little galaxy, we would find that this planet, the sun and the planet Earth are way out here in the sticks. I call them the suburbs. To me, that's a beautiful picture. And over the years as a high